Is it possible to practice resilience? Is it possible to have an emotional survival plan? Our guest today, Dr. Diego Hernandez, says absolutely, and you must have one.
You are a warrior.
321 status.
What kind of vehicle is it?
You are the very best your nation has to offer.
911.
Multiple shots fired.
They're asking you to lead.
5. We need a Bearcat.
It's up to us.
So 133. I need somebody that's got a visual on where the shooter is.
You must be sound in mind, body, and spirit.
42, where's the officer down? I have a rescue helicopter that wants to land and help.
This is the podcast that will make you the one.
Copy, running eastbound.
The one that will bring everyone back.
Trouble, we have shots fired, shots fired. Give me backup now.
Because no one else is coming.
We're going to have an officer shot. 100 block of East Street.
Suspect is down. Suspect is down.
This is the Squad Room.
Hello, partners. Welcome back to another episode of the Squad Room. I'm your host, Garrett Tesla, an active duty sergeant for a sheriff's office in Southern California. And on this show, we focus on how to improve our badges. Not just the badges that we wore on our chest, but the badges of our life, our beliefs, actions, discipline, goals, emotions, and service in the calling of serving others. Now, the other phrase I use a lot is to be the one. Well, the whole point of focusing and developing our badges is so that we are well prepared to go out there and be the one for other people. Be the one to bring other people back from the brink. Sometimes the person you need to bring back from the brink is yourself. And so on this episode today, we talk with Dr. Diego Hernandez. He is a veteran of the psychology community in the Special Forces realm. He works a lot with high-level Tier 1 operators and has done a lot of work with the military. Dr. Hernandez is a licensed clinical psychologist, and he focuses on health, wellness, and human performance. He's also a trauma expert and a master art therapist and an art trainer, which we will explain here in a little bit, but it stands for Accelerated Resolution Therapy. He is the clinical director of the Art Research Center at the University of Southern Florida and is the past clinical director of the military trial at art at University of South Florida. He's got numerous publications to his name, and he's a behavioral consultant for Warrior Mission at Ease and several other foundations, including Mission America, Wounded Warrior Project, and the Lone Survivor Foundation. I got to meet and spend a weekend with Dr. Diego almost a year ago now, in, not in a therapy setting like he normally would, but just in a men's retreat setting. And I've talked about a few other people who I've met through that before. But what I liked about him in talking with him was not only is he moving beyond just kind of the talk therapy, they're acknowledging the neurology and the neurological issues around trauma in the brain and how these are physical damages to the brain almost as much as you would have a bruise on your skin manifest after getting punched in the face. You get a black eye. The brain is the same way. It's no different, and they're treating it that way from that kind of perspective. It's pretty interesting. He's got his own private practice. He does a lot of work with first responders, and it's a great conversation about building resilience, practicing resilience, how to develop an emotional survival plan for yourself so that when you encounter trauma, you know what to do, and what are the options out there when it comes to the kind of therapy you may want to seek. And this episode is, I put myself out there a little bit and wasn't sure how to approach some of this. I've had psychologists on before. I realized that I can't talk, and I continue to talk, and we have these topics about trauma and PTSD and getting help and all those things, and I can't talk about how we need to remove the stigma of this and how it's okay to go seek treatment if I don't come clean myself. I can't tell you to go get treatment or go see a therapist or go get counseling or coaching or whatever you want to call it if I pretend that I myself haven't done it and that I try to hide behind the idea that, well, I'm okay, but maybe you aren't. So the truth is, I've tried therapy. And with mixed results, I've tried a few different ways, but I'm not giving up on it. And I actually like the idea. And as I talk about with Dr. Hernandez, and you'll hear it later, is I look at it as having a coach. If I want to get fit and I don't know what to do, I'm going to hire a trainer. I'm going to join a gym. I'm going to go to where the experts are. If I want to learn how to cook, I'm going to take a cooking class, or at least watch YouTube videos of people who know how to cook. If I'm going to do something with my mental health, then I need to go to the experts. I need to find somebody who can be on my team and help me navigate those things. And I talk all the time about the importance of having a team, having people around you that can support you and provide expertise in some way or another. And this is just part of my team. But even I, with all my proselytizing about the importance of mental health and seeking treatment and all that, have been reluctant to talk about it. Well, about 2 years ago now, I noticed that some weird things were occurring. Things that I thought had long been put away and put to bed and never had occurred to me. And then out of nowhere, they kind of came back up. Specifically, a traffic accident that I dealt with when I was very, very new. Where a semi-truck driver was fixing his truck, got sideswiped, and eventually died right there in the number 2 lane with me on top of him, trying to figure out what the fuck I was doing. I was scared. I was underprepared. I was scared of getting killed myself by the traffic. And it was an event that I completed the call and went on with my day and went on with my life, and never seemed to be an issue for a while. But I also work where I also live. And this particular location, I would pass probably at least once a day, and if I'm working, I'd pass it sometimes dozens of times a day. And I think that had something to do with it. But all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it kind of kicked up again. And I was noticing other things. Kind of a short temper. Some irritability. Well, I was working it checked out. So I have to highly encourage anybody who is feeling like they should get some help, some coaching, but they're reluctant to do it because of the stigma of it. Well, I get that. Trust me. And here I am just laying it all out, because the point of the show, the whole reason I started the show was to lay myself out there and be the experimental voodoo doll, and then report back and see how it helps. And I'm missing a huge component of that show if I'm not honest about the fact that therapy helps. Talking to somebody helps. Whether you use cognitive behavioral therapy, like I was more in, and EMDR, which is neurological based, or just talk therapy, or something like art, like the good doctor brings up later. If I'm not reporting back on the positive effects of that, then I am not serving you and not serving the audience, and I'm not fulfilling my obligations. So there it is. Think I'm goofy? Well, I guess that's up to you. Anyway, on to the episode. But first, I want to thank a couple people. This episode is sponsored by Hardhead Veterans. It's my belief that any assignment requires access to a high-quality ballistic helmet. Whether you're on patrol or responding to an active shooter or a SWAT cop busting down a door, a detective serving a search warrant, you need serious protection for your head. Hardhead Veterans makes NIJ-compliant helmets for reasonable prices to keep you in the fight. Stay tuned, because later in the show, I'm going to tell you more about how you can get an even better deal from this veteran-owned small business that supports cops and cop charities. This episode of The Squad Room is also sponsored by Blue Line Flex. Blue Line Flex is a fitness apparel brand owned and operated by a veteran cop on the East Coast. Justin, the owner, started Blue Line Flex to create high-quality apparel to give back to police charities. What I like about Blue Line Flex t-shirts is that they're actually flex and stretch, so they're more comfortable than other shirts. And they're cut longer so they can stay tucked in if you're wearing them underneath your uniform. Check them out at BlueLineFlex.com or on Instagram at BlueLineFlex. Dr. Diego Hernandez, welcome to the Squad Room. Thanks for being here, man.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
I'm lucky enough to call you, you're somewhere between an acquaintance and friend, I suppose, after getting to spend some time with you earlier this year at a retreat in Florida. But been following your work. We spoke a lot at that weekend together and just immediately decided that I needed to connect up with you and share with my audience the work that you are doing. So I introduced you with that doctor in front of your name before, and so why don't you explain to people first of all a little bit about your background and what do you do? What is that doctor before you?
Okay, I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I actually have a PsyD, which is a practitioner's degree. It's it's a little different than a PhD. A PsyD requires a couple of different levels of competency where you kind of have to have like a board level review for like to do psychological testing as well as doing therapy, and then of course you do your dissertation and all that too. So it sets my practice apart a little bit. I'm also the clinical director of accelerated resolution therapy research and military research over at the College of Public Health and University of South Florida. Currently, we have two small studies right now. One of them is with hospice, and it's a 4-session protocol with accelerated resolution therapy. And one that we're just wrapping up is yoga and jujitsu for post-traumatic stress. But I've been involved with all of the research on accelerated resolution therapy. I also have a private practice. I've been a trainer with the accelerated resolution therapy. Is also, one of the developers of the intervention specifically for, military, law enforcement, first responders. Been a trainer with the Army. We have about 300 people in Army behavioral health who are trained in this approach. I have a private practice, and I also work with different veterans groups around the country and do retreats around the world, both for personal growth and wellness and, human performance.
So one of the things that struck me right away that I wanted to bring you on is that you do a lot of work with Army Special Forces. And we actually met through a retired member, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, who's been on the show and will be again in a few months. What is it about that population, or that, I guess that's the right word, population of the Special Forces guys, or what are the dynamics that drew you to working with them? And then I'll ask some questions, I guess. Let's follow up on that.
Sure. Well, I work with them privately, and then also with some of the retreats like we do through the CARE Coalition. One of them is using the accelerated resolution therapy, and we do a retreat to Ireland. So it's going to be on the Gulf Channel this summer. And so they did a mini documentary on it. And part of it is we use the same techniques, not only to resolve past memories, but to focus on performance. So when we have, amputees and, the individuals who've got head injuries and it just, a number of different physical things going on. And some of them are active duty. Some of them are in the process of med boarding. And we're able to use the techniques and use golf as a means to kind of help work with their relationship with their body, their injury, sort of like, reconnect with themselves. And also, it's in Ireland. It's a great environment for it.
What do you think, because you have worked with some police and other first responders, what do you think the similarities are in that, I guess you could call it like a mental health threat environment, right? Like what are the similarities between Army Special Forces and the threats to their mental health that you see that are also present in the law enforcement population?
Okay, so a roundabout way to answer that is to actually talk about the mental health aspect. A lot of the work that we're doing actually has to do with memory, sleep, and performance. And it's the sort of stuff, if you think about what we all do for our jobs, we work out, we watch what we eat, we, trying to make sure that you get enough sleep whenever possible. We do all these things for training and conditioning our bodies so that way we can perform at a certain level, but we don't do that with our memory. We don't do that with our experiences. Those of us who end up teaching, we take those practical experiences and we try to convey that information, pass on wisdom, things that we've learned. How do we improve? How do we become more efficient in how we approach certain tasks and stuff? And that's what a lot of our work is involved with. So originally with the accelerated resolution therapy, we were studying its impact on post-traumatic stress. Those who have the symptoms of post-traumatic stress, not necessarily the diagnosis. And one of the things that I had to immediately do was in working with some of the folks who are active duty, particularly those who are, going to be redeployed, was to not only work through the memories that were impeding their performance, but to make a switch to start to focus on, well, how do we improve performance while those memories are activated? Because certain memories that we have, it also takes place with learning. When the nervous system is activated, when it's heightened, when we're on alert, when we're in that fight or flight state, performance, we function in that state, but it's not necessarily because you're under threat. And then the way the body responds, it continues to escalate. Those memories and those experiences, that type of learning is different than your, everyday stuff that you're going through. And that has to be processed. And it can only be processed when the mind is calm and relaxed. That's why, when the day's done and you're just, kind of, sitting there, or you take a break for a while, or you're injured, then all of a sudden your brain starts going to think about all that shit that bothers you, because it's kind of like your brain says it's safe now. So let's take a look at all that stuff so we can sort through it, learn from it, and file it and put it away. And that's where folks get stuck. And that goes back to your original question about mental health, is that these interventions have the potential to help to train and condition folks to prevent it from becoming a mental health problem. I look at post-traumatic stress as like type 2 diabetes. It's kind of an acquired condition, that affects weight and health. And all of a sudden, these other genetic tendencies that we have, we start to, experience them because of that state. And you start to correct that state, the other systems in the body start to respond. And it's the same thing. We have a small sleep study that we've done, and these half the guys who were in there, it's a very small sample size from our third large study at USF. Did a small sleep study and found a very small area of the brain that was overactive in the folks that met the diagnosis for post-traumatic stress, but was underactive in the general population, and showed that, after 5 sessions, it was able to, be similar to that. And right now they're working on a study in the VA in Tallahassee, to sort of follow up on some of that work. So it's kind of like a biomarker potentially of, it's really kind of a brain state.
So let me see if I understand this, if I'm following you correctly. So in a critical incident, like a shooting or something, like a major event like that, our body processes that information differently than if it were something that we were incurring, say, like sitting on the couch. We don't have that fight or flight. So in a critical stress environment, we're processing whatever information we're receiving differently. And because of the state that we're in, we can't process it until we are then relaxed, would that be then why symptoms of PTS start showing up after the fact when you're removed from that situation? You don't start necessarily feeling those symptoms right away in the middle of the critical incident, but 3, 4, 5 days out, maybe a year out, that's when your body starts to say, okay, well, I'm calm enough now to start processing this. And then that's where the bottleneck happens. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because what happens is when you start thinking about those events, it reactivates the body. So it sort of shut down the parts of your brain that you need to process it. So your ability to think and plan for the future in a meaningful way is something you only do in a kind of a relaxed state. When you're ramped up, you're thinking about where's the threat, where's the danger, how do I address this? Or even if it's just a problem, it's like, well, here's an issue that has to be dealt with right now. I can't think about the future. But you need to be able to be in that state where you're thinking about the future to integrate those intense memories.
I see. So even just thinking about the event again wouldn't necessarily that's not processing it. It kind of brings you back into that physiological recalling of that state, and then you're still not able to process it.
Right. So when you think about an event, what you're doing is you're activating that memory that's stored differently. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the reasons why sometimes talking about it helps, and then other times talking about it makes it worse. Is if you keep that memory gets activated, then it has to be restored again, and it's still restored in the part of the brain. It's the what we call subcortical. So your long-term memory is stored, in the the newer parts of the brain. This fight or flight stuff happens in, the more primitive parts of our brain that are involved in our survival. And so we can actually stay in this kind of subcortical loop. and that affects our learning. A great example of that is threat detection. You've probably heard of incidents in this past year where, another officer showed up on a scene and then was shot by a fellow officer, because their ability to detect threat can be sort of reduced by staying in this subcortical state. And it's actually a protective thing the brain does, because it's like it needs to make a quick decision. And to make that quick decision, it's going to filter out as much as it can in order to respond. So part of this conditioning is that we can improve people's ability to detect a threat simply by processing, working through those memories in order to get that part of the brain working more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. So it seems like across the country now, mental health treatment and an emphasis on mental wellness in first responders is becoming a more accepted idea, and more of the departments are starting to understand it's their obligation to take care of their people in this manner a little bit more. So I think that people are beginning, I hope they are, beginning to consider if they think they need, whatever you want to call it, therapy, someone to talk to, a
Right.
coach. What are some of the different things that people are out there looking at? Because, I'll share my own experience with this, just so that, I can't encourage people to go get treatment to talk about therapy or whatever if I can't say, openly and talk about these things myself. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm being a hypocrite if I don't. But probably about a year ago, a little over a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe even, decided I wanted to try it. I wanted to see. There was some weird stuff that kept popping up out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
Some memories that I thought were long gone that, I'm in a situation where I live in the area that I also work. So I can't drive down most any street without knowing something that happened on that street.
And that's a really good point. I mean, that's one of the really big differences between law enforcement, first responders, and the military is because you deploy to those situations, and then for law enforcement, it's every day. It's like you're not waiting to go home. You're in that, still living in that environment. And that's an added stressor.
So there was one particular situation that happened when I was just off training, and it was all it was a traffic accident. But it's a traffic accident that I pass at least once a day, if not several times a day, the location of it anyway. And all of a sudden that memory started kicking off every time I passed this spot again after years. And, thought, well, that's odd. And, so anyway, the point was that kind of provoked me, along with some, bad sleep, some, shortened patience. So some of those things I thought, okay, I want to go explore some different options, but I was overwhelmed by deciphering what was right for me and what sort of approach was best. So getting back to the question was, what are some of the things that are out there? I know there's cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR. Maybe you can explain both of those. And please explain ART as well. And because if someone's just sitting online and they Google therapy session my town or psychologist my town, they're going to get all sorts of different descriptions of stuff. What should they be going for?
I'll answer that question in a little more detail, because I want to think about that. I like to think about this in terms of more of a continuum. So, like you said, that different first responders are taking this prevention and wellness a little more seriously, and that's where I'm talking about the memory, sleep, and performance. So there's some groups, especially with different fire departments, like Boston Fire Department, a number of ones that are actually involved with the group. It's called O2X, Tactical Athlete Group.
Yeah, we've had them on the show.
Oh, okay, great. And so they probably spend some time talking about that mind-body relationship. And so the more efficient you are at managing stress and processing this information, the less that stuff gets stuck. So when things get stuck, and you start to encounter other life stressors, what it does is it reduces your ability to respond. Now, a lot of us just continue to respond because it's what we know to do. And because of our training and experience, we still can respond at a level that, is functional, but not necessarily adaptive. Mm-hmm. So gradually over time, the toll of that starts to kind of take the wear. And then when you start getting into the realm of mental health, you have different approaches. Some of those approaches are more modern approaches that are really focused on memory. So the description that you described, I mean, the example that you gave, you described somewhere where, maybe you've been, out of the job for a while. And then you encountered that experience where it kind of, triggered that memory. And so it increased sort of the tension that you're physically feeling. Your brain was trying to work through it while you were sleeping. And then kind of, provoked some other areas in your life. Let's say, if you were, snippy with your wife or something like that, then that creates a little more tension. But those kind of things just draw our attention to the fact that we need to take some action. And with your case, what you did, and it sounds like you sorted it through. So from some of the approaches that address memory, one of the earlier ones is something is called NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And that approach actually, kind of addresses the memory and how you experience it. The next approach that evolved out of that is something that's called EMDR. And that is, again, focused on the memory. But both of these approaches, even though they address the memory, they don't work towards a resolution. So the modern approaches that have evolved over the last 10, 15 years is actually this marriage between psychotherapy and neurology and neuropsychology. One of my areas of interest and why I went the PsyD route and went a neurological route, it was like, was looking for things like this. It's like, how do we merge what we know about the brain with psychotherapy? Because a lot of psychotherapy is just based on talk. These other approaches are based on the experience. We experience memory. So you have the accelerated resolution therapy, which, borrows from NLP and EMDR. And it's, the average for our research, with military and civilians is 3 to 5 sessions to, basically resolve most of the symptoms related to post-traumatic stress. We've had 3 studies for that, and it's generally pretty short term. We use it in different retreats and with different organizations and stuff. Another one that you're familiar with, you're going to talk with Dan about RTM. That also focuses on those memories that are stuck, and it uses some of the techniques from NLP to basically help calm and relax the body, so that way you can get through an event. ART does the same thing but uses eye movements. One of the differences that I see, and I'm a trainer for the ART and a researcher, but I've also been trained in the RTM and have had some experience with it. Both of them are really effective at working through that memory and moving it from that short-term storage to that long-term storage. And it's usually that process that happens within an hour to 90 minutes. And then every time you recall that memory, it's no longer a trigger, because it's stored differently in this kind of free-floating state. Some of the other similar approaches is something that's called rapid resolution therapy that uses hypnosis. But these 3 therapies are kind of the leading edge of addressing the problems as a memory problem. If we work through the memory, that frees up the brain, and it frees us up to actually start working on other stuff and work through it.
So a quick description was, I tried EMDR, and for people, just a descriptor of it, and correct me where I get the biology of this wrong, is but as your eyes move and as they track to different parts, like literally as your eyes move, you're accessing different parts of your brain, right? Or so then the idea is you're supposed to think about this traumatic event or this critical incident or whatever it is as you're moving your eyes in a specific pattern that the practitioner, the doctor, tells you to do or gives you to do. And you think about it and you do this multiple times, and then it's supposed to do that. It's supposed to send this memory from short term to long term. Is that the layman's description of EMDR?
Yeah, that would be the layman's description. And how EMDR does it is they have a varied technique. So they move their eyes in different ways. They have people focus on different things. What it separates ART from that, it's very focused. It's called a smooth pursuit eye movement. Mm-hmm. So it's a linear eye movement. If you think in terms of if you're tracking someone, you're your brain starts to move in this way that's sort of expectant. You're looking for the outcome, just like if you're trying to turn left and you're looking at traffic in both ways. It's like it narrows in on that focus, and it creates what's called an overloading of working memory. So both approaches sort of help you to access the memory and get you to a calm, relaxed state. We take it further by we're going to focus in on the memory and all the visceral aspects, which you don't have to communicate. So many of us work with folks who, have classified events that we have no knowledge of, because we're able to take someone through the protocol and work them through it, because you drive it through to a resolution. Grief is a big one. That's one of the reasons why we started doing the study at hospice. And usually we focus on the moment when it's someone that we're involved with, there's usually some moment where that event began. If it's someone who's like lost a loved one, it's like the phone call, the knock on the door, things like that too. And you start to focus around the shock and the sort of the pain of those moments. But as you process through those parts of it, the rest of the memory becomes more vivid. You begin to see a broader picture. And we kind of describe it in terms of more of a bird's eye view of the event. And so when it comes to grief and loss, one of the ways of dealing with grief is ideally to be able to focus on the meaning of that relationship in your life and what you carry forward with you, not just the moment when you lost that person. And we're able to get folks to that point.
So, we're talking about traumatic events, death of someone, a critical incident, special forces, military, classified clandestine operations. But where do you think the threshold should be for somebody who for them to say, okay, it's worth me going to some sort of therapy, whether it's a specific memory-based something like art, or is it just talk therapy? Who do you think should be considering doing this?
Well, I think there's a lot at stake when it comes to being able to manage your relationships with your family and doing your job. And when one of those things start to suffer in your life, it's going to make it harder, either harder. It's going to make things more challenging. And that's the time, especially if we start to look at some of the stuff as preventative. And the problem is that most of the time people have access to it when we call it a problem. So I have a problem with that, because this is like normal shit that we're dealing with. And for the most part, it's like if we have these tools and these resources, that's what's great about like the O2X Tactical and a number of these other programs that are helping us to access these tools. It can reduce the amount of downtime it takes going through a critical incident or a loss, and to be able to continue to function and adapt in a meaningful way. One of the things that really stands out to me when you look at like warrior cultures, you look at samurais, for example, they have a philosophical and a meditative way of dealing with both the body and the spirit, and tying that in with the actions that you take, as a warrior. And then in the case with the samurai, they're like sheriffs. They doled out justice, and, they're like judges too, and things like that. But it's like those things that kind of guide us as a complete person, not just these kind of disjointed actions. And that's, and I think we're moving towards that in society, is recognizing just kind of this overall need in these other areas. And what's happening is neuroscience is producing a ton of stuff and showing us, okay, this is what's going on in your body.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that got me over the hump is I preach on the show about the idea of the importance of having coaches or mentors, however you want to, people who know something that you need to know that you don't know yet, right? Whether that's a physical trainer or a financial coach or whatever, somebody like
Absolutely.
That. And rather than looking at therapy as going in and going to somebody with a problem, it was about they have tools and resources that I don't yet have, that I want to learn and then put into my toolbox. And so if I can learn from this person something that helps me be a better cop, a better husband, a better dad, then why wouldn't I? And it's only the what's the word I'm looking for? The reputation is not the right word, but I don't know why I'm blanking. But this cloud of suspicion over the idea that being a first responder, you can't seek therapy or get treatment or seek out someone who knows something about this stuff. And that was really the only thing holding me back, and I think it's the only thing holding most people back. You know?
Oh, I agree. I mean, some of the research that's been done within the military shows it's a high percentage of folks recognize the value in going and seeking help. But the biggest barrier to that is that concern about their career, how it's going to influence them. And so, as you know, as the environment changes and the perception changes, and we start to look at some of these resources as a resource, as a tool, is like you said, needing a good coach. One of the things that I find sometimes is that certain environments sort of inhibit the sharing of some of that wisdom and information that folks need.
Sure.
And in because the environment is like, well, you need to prove yourself so I can know if I can trust you, I can rely on you for safety and stuff. But it's that conveying of wisdom from one generation to the next, and that experience, and sort of like kind of normalizing this process that can help people become more effective. I mean, the job is hard enough as it is, and sometimes we make it harder on ourselves.
Yeah, stigma. That's the right as you finish topic. Stigma is the word I was trying to come up with. The stigma of going to seek therapy. All right, sorry, I was excited. I remember that because I drew a blank. Yeah. So, moving a little bit slightly differently, your practice is called Balanced Living Psychology. Mm-hmm. Explain to me, because this is obviously something I struggle with as a dad of 2 young kids, a full-time officer, and also a part-time podcaster, amongst other things. Like, how define what balanced living is to you?
It's interesting when I was looking for a name to describe my practice, because it's like I work with some integrative physicians and other professionals, the functional medicine. It's some of my ideas have changed in terms of, I've thought about at times to renaming it to adaptive living rather than balance, because it's like sometimes it's like the idea of having a perfect balance it's almost like a kind of pressure that we have.
Yeah, sure.
So I look at it, it's like all those domains that you mentioned about who you are. I think all of them just need equal care. Sometimes you'll spend more time and energy in one over the other. But as long as you're taking care of those things, which includes taking care of yourself, I think that is that kind of that balance that helps us to adapt and to move forward. One of the differences is a philosophical difference as well. Like when you think about how we treat cancer, the longest time it's just been kill it, kill it, kill it. And then, in the late 80s and 90s, there was these techniques that were coming up. It's like, well, how do people spontaneously recover? How do we activate the body's resources to do that? And so now it's been some time, and some of these way out there kooky theories are actually the ways in which we're treating it now. We're looking at how does the body recover? How do we get the body to heal itself? How does the body work? And that's what it's the heart of kind of functional medicine. And this is one of the approaches that many of us who are training these techniques take in regards to memory. How does memory work? What's our relationship with it? How is it affecting us? And how do we address these things when they come up?
Yeah, the more you're right about this pressure of having a quote unquote balanced work-life balance, right? That's a buzz term by itself, and it's like I don't think you can consider them separate sides of a weight scale,
right?
Where you give a little and you get a little, you take a little from one side or the other, and it's this back and forth, and you end up walking this tightrope between the two. Versus, to me, the path seems to be to somehow integrate all of that into just who you are.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, something I talk about on this show, and the way I frame this whole balanced living idea is through the acronym BADGES. And just these 6 points of a sheriff star that take up and that need focus, and that through focusing on these things, you can self-develop and become also self-aware, but it's just in your beliefs, your actions, your discipline, your goals, emotions, and your service, meaning service to others and service to the people who serve you. And it seems to me that that's the program I've been using for like a year to try and really make sure that I am holistically balanced.
Hi, my name is Kit Dump, and I am the Sales and Marketing Director for Hardhead Veterans. Hardhead Veterans believes that police should have the best equipment available to them. That's why Hardhead Veterans exists. I come from a military family. As far as I can think back, that was what was going to happen. When I first got into the military, when I first checked into my first team, we were issued what was called the Mitch helmet, a mid-ear type cut helmet. We wore those things for every operation, every mission. Helmets at that time were around $1,500 for a decent quality, high-cut ballistic helmet that worked well with everything you'd want it to do. With helmets, a lot of people see the resistance to penetration test as the end-all be-all, and our helmets certainly pass that test for level 3A, but there's a whole nother level of tests. Publish that data directly on our website, and you can actually compare apples to apples there and see what helmets are performing at and the actual lab data there. There are quite a few companies now that have come out and are selling very similar helmets that do not meet the full battery of tests. Departments would love to outfit all their guys with helmets. That's really out of the question for most departments. The reaction has been amazing. Go look at our reviews on Facebook or Google. I'm Kit Dump, and our mission is to help you guys stay safe.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, that's what I was getting at before about, the samurais having their code. It's like when we have a code and we have a way of looking at this and saying that, hey, this domain of like memory is no different than going to the gym and working out, that all these things are necessary for us to function and to adapt. And then how do we improve them so that we can perform better?
And I think one thing that's missed a lot with this belief about psychotherapy or this belief about sleep or physical fitness is that they are silos of improvement versus the 10x effect that any of these things have on each other, right? And you've mentioned sleep several times, and we were talking before I started recording about former guest and friend Kurt Parsley, who's a sleep specialist. He worked with the Navy SEALs for a long time, and how he's the one who got me to open my eyes to the fact that my sleep disorders, my legitimate sleep disorders, were affecting and likely provoking some of these trauma incidents, but also the medical issues that come as a result of that. It's
absolutely
fascinating how much all of that is interactive.
Well, yeah. I mean, what happens if we don't eat? All right, fine, we lose weight, but we don't have the energy to do the stuff we need to do. Right. It's like this same thing. It's like this is the environment, and this is our body. These are things that are kind of true about our human experience. And if we want that to be adaptive and to function, we need to take care of all these domains. And it doesn't have to be like some ideal way of taking care of it. It's just we just have to have a good outlook and a regimen. That is productive, that actually fits our bodies.
It's funny too that, like I'm in the back of my head thinking I didn't go to the gym this morning. I need to go later, and the importance of the physical fitness. And there's nobody in this line of work that I'm in who is going to suggest that being physically fit's a bad idea, right? Mm-hmm. And that we all know we need to stay physically fit, and that you go to the gym to do that, or you go to yoga, or you go cycling, or whatever it is you do to get fit, but you need to stay fit for the job. But we often forget that that important piece between our ears also needs that same practice and that same discipline.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
And so that's why we have people like you, luckily, on the show. So, one thing I was thinking about this morning as preparing for the show was building resilience. And you have spoken about resilience, and you've talked about it in the past when I've seen you in person. And I began to wonder, like, what's a way that we can practice resilience? Because to me, my experience was I had a pretty I'd say better than good, childhood growing up, no issue, like great family home. I didn't come out of anything resilient and, or that caused resilience or needed me to prove resilience as a young person. And then, as I became a young adult, I had my, experiences moving away from home, and those things have certainly caused some challenges that proved some resilience and some self-confidence. But really, for me, and I think for a lot of people, my biggest resilience challenge was probably the academy. Like that 6 months of intense mixture of boot camp and college where you're getting yelled at and screamed at, you're being physically taxed to your ultimate abilities, you're having to educate yourself at a rapid pace. So that was very intense, and it was very stressful, and it was probably the most significant gauntlet of my life. It most absolutely was, right? So that was 14 years ago, and it was only for 6 months. And so I'm trying to think of these ideas or this time since then where I've had an opportunity to practice resilience. And I think I've missed a lot of opportunities. So what are the ways that we can practice resilience? Or can we, or do we have to wait for something quote unquote bad to happen to us?
Well, if that's part of our philosophy and our outlook and our commitment or our code, it starts with our outlook. So, for example, you may have seen one of those memes floating around lately. It says something to the effect of, instead of saying, "Why is this happening to me? What is this teaching me?" Mm-hmm. If we come from that aspect of that, we're always learning, they're always growing. That's a resilient idea, because it's like it can help us to adapt rather than the expectation that is, I should be handling this, but it's like, okay, well, how do I figure this out? Mm-hmm. And many of us do that in demanding situations. We can embrace the suck and press and push towards a goal for a short period of time, but is that sustainable? I mean, it's like, especially you think of the wear and tear in our bodies, there's a lot that we can do in the short term, but then we have to rest. We have to recuperate. And it's really kind of having a philosophy. Some of the biggest obstacles that happen in life, some of them are expected. At some point in your life, these things are going to happen. When you start sort of planning for them, not to prevent it from happening, but how do I adapt to this situation? How do I be the most present? A friend of mine, his mother was in hospice, and they're like, we were talking about it, and she's like, what do I do about this? It's like, I don't even want to think about it. And I'm like, well, what are you going to do with the time you got left? It's like, your mom's in hospice. You have a limited amount of time. How do you want to spend it?
Right.
So it's really just kind of increasing awareness, and embracing the situation for what it is. It's like, yeah, that sucks. It's awful. But, at some point, those things are going to happen. The harder things are the ones that are not expected. Mm-hmm.
What about those times in our life where things are going fine and, everything's looking like roses and sunshine, and we don't have anything that's necessarily tripping us up, but maybe we're also turning a blind eye to the cliff we're about to fall over, metaphorically.
Right.
How can we plan for those things, or what are the things we can do daily or weekly or monthly that maybe set our mind to the right place? I mean, I know you said about changing the mindset from why is this happening to me to what can I learn, but that's in a specific something, you're being challenged by something, but
right.
Where can we go on a daily basis, or what kind of routine would you encourage people to approach it with?
Well, during those times where you're enjoy yourself, but don't do that to check out of life. Do it to invest yourself in life. So the same idea of like, what is there to learn? You can do it during those quiet times. Let's say, you're having a good afternoon, hanging out with your friends and your family, and take it in, focus on it, notice it. I mean, what you want to do is be able to enhance your awareness and appreciate those things while you have them. Because when we don't, what happens is that it just builds up the fear of losing those things that we value.
So you think an idea of cultivating gratitude is one of those things that kind of builds our emotional bank for that resilience when we need it?
Oh, absolutely. So cultivating gratitude, an easy way to start off is, waking up every day thinking about what you're grateful for rather than, oh God, what do I got to do today?
Right.
Even doing the same thing. I mean, that's part of my meditation when I wake up and when I before I go to sleep is looking at those things that I'm grateful for. And then what are the things that are important for me to take on? Another part of that is, it slipped my mind.
Well, when it come to you, it's funny you say that because I had the same experience. I use a journal. My mind is all over the place. I'm scattered. I've got a million things running through my head at any given time. So I use a journal every morning to kind of plan out my day. And, what are the 5 things I need to get done? How am I going to do that? What's my day look like? But the first question this journal asks is, what are you grateful for today?
Right.
Before I start working on that list of to-dos and getting my mind spun up about, being behind schedule on whatever it is I'm behind on, because I'm certainly behind on something, I have to pause and think, what am I grateful for? And it may just be that great cup of coffee I just made, or it might be my entire family, or the fact that there's not a cloud on the sky, but it gives whatever, minor or major. I love that one of the first things I think about in the morning is something to appreciate. And that's something I encourage anyone to do.
That gratitude every day, is really, really key. And there's been a couple of studies looking at people adopting this practice of gratitude and actually how it sort of changes our brain.
Oh, really?
There's actually a physical way to measure adopting a practice of gratitude. Another a little more advanced aspect of that is being grateful for the success of others. We're so focused on our success and comparison, but I mean, that's like a superhuman power to be able to sort of just appreciate the success of others, even people you don't like. Especially when you're working in a group setting where it's like what we all do impacts each other. Being able to celebrate somebody else's success, and then you take it from there. It's like, how do I contribute to the success of others? Not so much that you get, caught up and lose sight of what you're working on, what you're responsible for, but it is being part of it. So that adapting, it goes back to us passing on the wisdom that in knowledge from different generations. I mean, there's sort of a natural human thing that we need to be able to do, and we don't. We hand it off and say, okay, that's the next generation's problem. It's not our problem anymore. And and there's this big disconnect to where it creates a steeper learning curve.
Yeah, I think the flip side of wishing gratitude or wishing success for others, that's a great thing, and it's a skill that has to be developed for sure. But one of the things I've found and use is to also not only share in the success of others, but share in the suffering of others, in the sense that you practice trying to empathize with someone who you do not know or you do not like, and just wishing them happiness. Just this mental rehearsal of thinking of a person and just kind of wishing that they have a happy and healthy life. Not a specific goal or anything like that, but it's a good lesson. And if you want to find out where you are stuck or where you're hung up with people, try that. Think about people
absolutely.
You may have conflicts with, people in your superior chain of command who you may not like, and trying that exercise and how difficult that might be to wish someone you don't like happiness. But it builds a sense of gratitude as well.
Well, yeah, and sometimes that wishing them happiness is in the quietness of your own mind or heart.
It's not. This is not something you do person to person. This is in your own mind and a rehearsal of a kind of a thing in your own head. Yeah, this is not. I don't suggest you go up to your captain and say, "Hey, I wish you a lot of happiness." That might get a weird response.
Because what it does is it shapes your ability to respond, but you're also, for some people, their ability to create unhappiness, it fuels them. Or their ability to get adoration or other things, just fuels them. Yeah. And when you sort of step outside of that and you put your, emphasis on, on the job and on other things, not to compete with them, what you're doing is you're removing their fuel. And you're not getting caught up in that mess, because part of that mess is what kind of creates those kind of uncomfortable feelings on your part. Because you're like, I'm investing myself in this situation by doing X, Y, and Z, and why does it just not feel right?
So another thing I want to touch on with you is this idea of and not only just building resilience, but then having an emotional survival plan. You know, we often have physical plans, physical fitness plans. We might have a trainer. We might follow an online program. We might have something we've just been doing since high school, lifting. But it's rare for somebody like, say, go to the gym and just kind of futz around and, you know, not have something specific they want to accomplish out of that day at the gym, whether it's cardio or weights or jiu-jitsu or whatever. But we often lack emotional survival plans. How can we develop an emotional survival plan? Can we do something that helps us plan in advance for these types of things, when these things happen?
Yeah, if we change our relationship with our emotions, we won't have to have a survival plan for them. Usually we have survival plans when disasters happen. Part of the problem with our emotions goes back, a couple of 100 years, where it's just, we've just minimized the role of emotions and experience, and really tried to, some of it was like evident in the eugenics movement. We even see it in some of the different therapies where it's like, oh, it's just pure thought. Back in the 80s, there was a book by a fellow by the name of D'Amato, and it's called Descartes' Error. And he's one of the folks who started pushing to the role of emotions in thinking, feeling, experience, and perception. And Descartes is the guy who came up with the saying, it's like, I think, therefore I am, putting all the emphasis on thought. But feelings, they impact us so much. And our culture right now is kind of suffering from a lack of emotional and sensory overload, because we're being bombarded with messages from politicians and from the news media, and even the news has got it down to what's called a fear-based message. It's a tone of voice. It's a crisis, that there's a danger that you need to attend to right away, and that kind of stuff gets your attention. We're wired for it. So the science of that has gotten so good that we've had to start filtering this stuff out, and blocking it out in order for us to just kind of get through the day. Or we choose things like, food, alcohol, other stuff. I mean, both two things that I enjoy, but you try to, make that fit into your lifestyle and not be a way to manage that sensory and emotional overload. So,
yeah, it definitely seems like we're being provoked into that fight or flight, right?
Oh yeah, intentionally. I mean, even if you think about video games, probably in one of the games, Microsoft Halo, the first-person shooter game, it was one of the first ones where they sat people down and did neuroimaging and just tried to maximize the reward and frustration ratio to get people hooked and keep them there in the game. The same thing happens with television and advertisements and everything. There's all these competing forces for our attention.
Here's something that's extremely frustrating for me recently is the negativity by some law enforcement media now, and how they are using that same fear provocation to whip up this frenzy and idea and belief that the entire country is out to get us, and that we're under attack, and that we are being held hostage. All these provocative terms, but we certainly have a dangerous job. No one's going to deny that. I had to put the black band back on my badge this morning for a 22-year-old officer who was shot and killed last night, who had been off training for 2 weeks. And
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, 2 weeks, and she was shot and killed on a traffic stop by someone who, as far as I know, it wasn't even involved in the traffic stop. It just assassinated her, right? And in Shreveport, a night ago, same thing. A young female officer on her way to work gets shot in the head. There's no doubt this is a violent job, and that there are people out there that don't like us and that will kill us just for the uniform we wear. However, we can't go through our career and our job and our interactions with the 99.9% of the public that care for us and appreciate us with this attitude of us versus them. It's not going to work that way.
Right.
And to me, buying into these ideas that we are under attack and et cetera, is really diminishing our emotional survival plan. And it is just hacking off our resilience at the knees, because we're setting ourselves up to believe and to be predisposed to point towards that echo chamber for when something does happen, say, see, I told you. And then nothing actually ever happens or gets better as a result.
No, I mean, you're really on to something there too. And I think you're, on the pulse of something that's, increasingly problematic. When you create this us versus them, all we try to do is, we fight for those who are most like us and try to find more creative ways to get them. It's that whole tribal response. There's a bunch of social psychology research on that too. It's like you put people in certain scenarios and then they have these, sort of archetypal way of looking at the us versus them. And, that's where things like community policing and other, points of view helps you to see how we're connected to others and how we're part of the community. I mean, again, that's a whole other topic to talk into, but it's like when it comes down to that fear-laden message, people use it because it works. And it's just like in a bad marriage. It's like when people are just shouting because they want to be heard. They're not really giving two craps about the whole.
The tribal thing too is absolutely, I mean, I understand why it's easy for us to fall into this tribal mentality because, I mean, for gosh sakes, I go to work and I wear the exact same colors, style, outfit of everybody else I work with, right? I mean, we talk in a code that the public doesn't understand. We drive the same cars. We like everything about us is the same. It's easy to then become a tribe. And there's a lot of great things that come out of that.
Absolutely. Esprit
de corps. Absolutely. But what we miss sometimes is that this thin blue line that we talk about is not the line between us versus them. It's us standing and loving the things that are behind us and protecting what is the citizens and everybody else in the country, defending them from the evil and the criminals and that sort of stuff that are on the other side of that line. And I think people misunderstand sometimes the thin blue line is not police versus the rest of people. It's us standing on the line, loving what's behind us, not hating what's in front of us.
Right. So let's say, what would it be like if we change the wording from to protect and serve to we kill bad guys? What's gonna happen to our mentality? What's gonna happen, to just the way that we conceptualize situations, and then our behavior will follow suit.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Doc, I know you got to run. I appreciate your time today. Do you have anything you want to put out there? Anywhere you want people to locate you, either on socials, your website, anything like that?
Balanceliving.com. You can find that online or on Facebook. Again, I think a huge part of this is trying to redefine the problem from a mental health problem to this is just we need to work with how the body works, and we need to provide some of these services and training for law enforcement in order to help them to adapt and to be able to come home at night with a little bit of peace.
That is the goal. Come home and be at peace. Doc, thanks for your time. Appreciate it. All right, if you like this episode of The Squad Room, please share it with somebody, grab their phone, download it, hit subscribe, sign them up for the mailing list, drive them over to somewhere and make them, I don't know. I'm just saying, share it, please. Get this information out there. We need to reduce the stigma of seeking help, getting a coach, getting some counseling, getting some help. To sign up for our mailing list, of course, you can text The Squad Room, all one word, to 44222. From your phone, you can go to thesquadroom.net for show notes, and you can sign up for the mailing list there. And please join the Facebook group. We're going to be doing some stuff in there quite a bit. All right, everybody, until next time, take care of each other and stay safe.